Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator, the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael, of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation, brothers and sisters, we do not intend for this to be long, but we do intend, brothers and sisters, to bring this out to the family, bring this out to the brothers and sisters. And so in light of that, we hope and pray that everybody is well and will be better. In this presentation, this will be, brothers and sisters, on the channels, More to Yeshaya History Lessons and More to Yeshaya History Lessons 2. Okay, so brothers and sisters, without any further ado, let us get into this particular presentation, if we will. Thank you for your time. Shalom, giving honor to the Most High. African or Hebrew Diaspora. This presentation is brought to you by Danitepublications. We do not claim to know everything, and we are open to constructive criticism. We hope you enjoy, learn from, leave a comment concerning the video. Please subscribe to the channel. So without any further ado, brothers and sisters, we are going to bring this out to the people, hoping you are well and will be better. Get your pens, pads, and take notes. The dispersion of the Jews began with the sack of Jerusalem in 587 BC or BCE, when Nebuchadnezzar carried the inhabitants of the southern kingdom of Judah into captivity beyond the Euphrates. Some of them, or their children, settled so happily in their place of exile that when Cyrus overthrew Babylon in 538 BCE and rescinded the decree of banishment, they chose to remain permanently in Babylonia and Mesopotamia. formed the nucleus of what eventually became one of the largest and most important of the communities of the diaspora during the Roman period, the Jews of Parthia. Now, why do we want to point that out, brothers and sisters? Why do we want to point that out? The Jews of Parthia. Because these were the people that later on, during the time of Antiochus VII, that helped defend the Israelites. So it was Israelites in history that actually did help and defend other Israelites. So brothers and sisters, what can be gleaned and ascertained in this particular matter? From the beginning of Babylon coming into their 11th dynasty, the Chaldean dynasty of Babylon, if you will, Nabopolassar's son named Nebuchadnezzar took captive of the southern kingdom of Judah. As we've been putting out on this channel, such as in a presentation from Jerusalem to the Hood, parts 1 through 6, which you can subscribe to the channel and see it. You can see it without subscribing, but we do ask you to subscribe. You'll be able to sit there and see what the prophet Jeremiah spoke upon. How the Assyrians, even before the Babylonians, had a situation going on in that particular realm and in that particular case. So, brothers and sisters, let us continue in this particular manner. Emigration from Palestine to Egypt was one of the side effects of the exile, and Cambyses' annexation of Egypt in 525 BCE is said to have brought Jews to the country. So let's stop right there. Now, we are pointing out about the matter of Cambyses. He was the son of Cyrus II. He was also the cousin of Darius I. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is the same Darius I who was, brothers and sisters, one of the rulers inside of Egypt. Did you know that? During Dynasty 27, the Persians was ruling in Egypt. Even on the Manetho, or for what it's worth, the Manetho record in that particular case. So let's go on. But the influx of the Jews into Egypt began with the foundation of Alexandria and continued under the Ptolemies until the 1st century AD. The Jews of Egypt could be, though probably with some exaggeration, at 1 million. Cyrenaica was another popular center of Jewish settlement from the 3rd century BC or BCE. So where is Cyrenaica? That's in Libya of today. Libya is, brothers and sisters, west of Egypt. The people in ancient Libya were called the Libu people by the Egyptians. Did you know that? And some state that these were some of the people who would migrate later on to Mauritania and become the Moors that wound up going into the land of Spain and ruling eventually. So let's go on into this particular matter. Ptolemy I sent Jewish colonists to secure Cyrene and other Libyan cities. And as Cyrenaica remained under Ptolemaic rule until it was bequeathed to Rome in 96 BCE. What are we pointing out, brothers and sisters? In the matter of Rome and the Ptolemies. In the book that I wrote, Egypt Talk and Writing, the link of it will be in the description on how to acquire it. Until next week, you'll be able to get that book for $20 on Amazon, and afterward, it will be online for $30. I list the line of the Ptolemies, brothers and sisters. Ptolemy the 13th, in that era is when Ptolemy, to Tacitus, the Roman historian, was what they call the first Roman to set foot inside the temple of the Jews, the kingdom of the Israelites. And we want to point that out for edification purposes. So if I can be heard and people are in good spirits, please type in the number 4. Again, this is on channels Mordecai Yeshaya History Lessons and Mordecai Yeshaya History Lessons 2. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, my love, Sarai. So you had it to where the Ptolemies, as pointed out in the book that I wrote called Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68, history untold to the masses. The Ptolemies ruled for a certain time until the Penian battle, as well. So these are things we want to point out for reference purposes. All right? Immigrants or immigration from Egypt continued. Jews formed a significant proportion of the population of the city of Cyrene, which is in Libya, by the early 1st century BC, when according to Strabo, it comprised 4 groups: citizens, farmers, resident aliens, and Jews. And events in the late 1st and early 2nd centuries AD testified to the size and wealth of the Jewish, which we know as Israelite, settlements in a province as a whole. Brothers and sisters, that place is in northern Africa, as is Egypt in northern Africa. The Israelites were used to going to that particular place. And as this mentioned right here, you get this information from a book called Jews Under Roman Rule by Mary Smallwood, is where I got this from for reference purposes. It's a college reference, brothers and sisters. And I would like to say, I'm thankful to the Most High that the internet and the audio is working out well. But when people, or should I say, and when people respect your channel enough to want to be a participant in listening or commenting or sharing or all of that, give them something new. Give them something worth their time. What are we talking about? And where is the spirit and genre in this presentation? Hebrew dispersion. African or Hebrew diaspora. Because the Atlantic slave trade didn't take all countries in Africa. In the countries where the Atlantic slave trade did happen, not everybody in those countries was taken. But brothers and sisters, by the time you get to when Hadrian comes along the scene, you wouldn't find, brothers and sisters, more than 5,000 Israelites inside the land of Israel. And Hadrian of Rome, a Spaniard, by the way, yes, died in 138 AD. We went over before in a presentation called From Kemet to Compton regarding the matter of what happened with Hadrian and so forth. So you can check out the videos on this channel. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Citing, quote, their teachers, the book African Origins of Major Western Religions, The Black Man's Religion, Volume 2, written by Dr. Ben, a scholar in the eyes of many people. He's now deceased. What can we see him saying in this particular case? In North Africa, just before the period of Christianity's legal entry into Rome, due to Constantine the Great's conversion in the 4th century, which is 325 or so AD or CE, there were many Hebrew, brackets, Jewish tribes that are of indigenous African so-called Negroes origin. Let's remember that. I would like for us, please, to remember this particular line as we go along with this. African, and I want to use the highlighter, not the pen. I apologize, family. All right? African Negroes origin. Let's remember that line as we go along, showing maps and things of that kind of nature, giving the people hopefully something worth their time and their attention. So let's go on and see what Dr. Ben, who had a Hebrew name, said. These African Jews, as all other Roman, non-African of the era meaning the time frame, were caught in a rebellion in Cyrene, hold on. Did we not just read from Mary Smallwood's book, Jews under Roman Rule, about Cyrene? And Strabo, mentioned by my teacher, Kohen Mikael, in his book, Israelites and Jews, A Significant Difference, speaks about the Israelites in Cyrene. So we see them going further west and west. So let's see what happened according to Dr. Ben. This rebellion also marked the beginning of a mass Jewish migration southward into Sudan or West Africa, along the way to the city of Air or Ir, and into the countries of Fouta Djallon and Senegal, Senegambia. Let's remember the Gambia as we get along in this. See, brothers and sisters, we want to, in this particular case, cite our sources and why we say what we say. And also, in part, to quell the spirit, Israelites are anti-African. No, we're not. Israelites are not anti-African no more than the Tutsis and Hutsis who was fighting each other. It's tribal matters, not continental matters. As pointed out in the documentary called Hidden Colors, made Francis Cresswell sing rest in peace. Not all of Africa was what you call monotheistic. There were tribes, clans, nations, languages, dialects, languages, and so forth. So these are things we want to point out for reference purposes. Into the countries of Fouta Djallon and Senegal, which lie below the parabolic curve of the Niger River's most northern reaches, where the city of Timbuktu or Male presently stands. Now, if you were following the channel, and I'm not saying you're a follower, but if you was listening to the channel, you would remember that we spoke, brothers and sisters, about Mali in a presentation on this platform. So again, we do ask you all to comment, like, and share, and to subscribe to the channel. But let's remember indigenous African, so-called Negroes' origin, and what he said about Gambia and who migrated there. Let's go on, family, citing Dr. Ben. Who you see there on the right side are part of the so-called Falashas, the Beta Yisrael. Do you know Dr. Ben, Yosef Ben Yochanan, is a Hebrew name? Yosef in Hebrew means adding or increasing. Ben means what? Son. Yochanan means God is gracious. So Dr. Ben's whole name, Yosef Ben Yochanan, is a Hebrew name. He stated that his people are the so-called Falashas. He said, that's my people. That's where he comes from. He comes from an Israelite community in Gondar and Lalibela area of Africa, in Ethiopia, should I say, directly. So let's see what he continues to say in this. Dr. Ben goes on to relate that Black Israelite immigrants from Northern and Eastern Africa merged with the indigenous groups in Western Africa. What? Dr. Ben said Israelites that were in Northern and Eastern Africa. North Africa like Egypt, North Africa like Libya, where Cyrene is at. Said what? Merged with indigenous groups in Western Africa to become the Fulani or Fouta Djallon, Borno, Kanem, and Lake Chad. Now, when you go in a presentation called Simeon and Dan, giving honor to the Most High, I pointed out that the people in Kanem stated they came after Assyria fell, and those Israelites didn't go into Babylon, but they wound up going into Northern Africa after the fall of Assyria. So could that be the Aseret that the Apocrypha talks about in the book of Ezra, chapter 13? So when it says no man's foot tread upon it, that might just mean no Israelite man treaded upon it when you go in the Apocrypha. What am I saying? Brothers and sisters, Aseret in the book of Ezra is not talking about the Western Hemisphere. But that's a whole other subject that is addressed in the book we're going to mention as we go along. In Lake Chad, Chadian, Borno, Fouta Djallon, they also form the parent stock of groups such as the Ashanti, the Hausa, the Bene Ephraim, mentioned in earlier matters, and the Mavumbo or Mayomba. Do you know that the God people in part say they come from Israel? There was a man that helped me get my book together, Egypt Talking Writing. I interviewed him. And he said his people, the God that's in Togo, come from the land of Israel. And he pointed that out. I interviewed him in like the book that I wrote for those who are interested. Egypt Talking Writing. There's another person that was a messenger that would come to the building I work in. And he was from the Igbo people. And I said, where you people from? He said, oh, we the Igbo Jews. We from Israel. I was like, okay, no problem. Why didn't I exchange numbers? But there's still information out there upon that matter. The Ashanti people that you see, brothers and sisters, in Ghana, do you know they have a chart of their leaders that go all the way back to King David on the throne? Now, when we say David, we're not talking about in Europe, because there was a David who ruled in Europe, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about King David, the father of Solomon. Do you know there is a people in Africa, in Liberia, that call themselves Dan? And no disrespect, like the ancient tribe of Dan, they got their idols and everything else. See, the Jewish man tried to say, oh, if you're saying you're the Jews of old, you was worshiping idols. But so was Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. So was Ahab, the son of Omri. So was Manasseh, the son of Ammon. Were they not still Israelites? Wicked, but were they still not Israelites? So as we get into the timing of Yom Kippur, as these days progress into such manner, let's understand our history and where we come from and how we fell in part as a people. We want to point this out for reference purposes. Let's continue. Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to sit there and have this to be remembered. Fulani. The Fulani people, and it's not trying to be disrespectful or so, when I did my test around, say, the timing of my little princess's birth, that's where they said more than likely and mainly I personally come out of and from. I was like, oh, okay. Because I wanted to sit there and give my daughter a little bit more information. But yeah, they say that you come from this part of Africa, namely and mainly this part of the tribe. The country was Senegal. Is that why, no disrespect to get too personal, I like to go to the Senegalese place to eat? I don't know. But brothers and sisters, we want to point out that in many cases, that's where the tribes of Israel migrated to. And we want to show this citing citations. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. We already showed one with that. West Africa has black Jews also. And we're asking you all to subscribe to the channel, family. It is definitely appreciated. Now, I'm going to make it my concerted effort to go through the subscribers and subscribe to your channel out of respect. Because I realize I'm not subscribed to as many channels, having 600-something subscribers. I'm not subscribed to everybody who subscribed to the channel. So I'm going to go in through the list and subscribe to all of the people's channels so it can be a give and take kind of matter. And watch your videos and comment and like as well, as I've been asking people for years to do upon my channel. It's only respect to do so if you're asking for it. Give what you're asking for. Let's look at this right here. In the matter, say, of Yom Teruah, they're blowing the horns, ram's horns, in this particular case. Do you know where these people are? Brothers and sisters, so just want to point that out for reference purposes. These people are part of the Igbo people that celebrate in holy days in modern day Nigeria. So when J.A. Rogers in his book called 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro points out that, quote, West Africa has black Jews also, we definitely want to cite our sources and show what we're talking about for reference purposes. Let's continue on brothers and sisters, the book we're talking about is what you see right there. And in that book, the author, again, J.A. Rogers, he passed away in the 1960s. He stated that West Africa has black Jews also. What part was he talking about? Who were the people whom he was speaking of, brothers and sisters? Let us get into this particular matter. Thank you for that. Oluda Equiano, also known as Gustavus Vasa. And let's see, brothers and sisters, in this particular case, what is said. All right? Thank you for that, family. In his book there, brothers and sisters, and he passed away in the 18th century, but he was still noted for saying the following. Oluda Equiano in Igbo stressed the similarities of between the Old Testament Jews and those of his own people. Like the Israelites in their primitive state, our government was conducted by our chiefs or judges, our wise men and elders, and the head of the family with us enjoyed a similar authority over his household, with that which is ascribed to Abraham and the other patriarchs. The law of retaliation obtained almost universally with us as with them, meaning with us Igbo as with them Israelites. And even their religion appears to have shed upon us a ray of its glory, for we had our circumcision, we had our sacrifices and burnt offerings, our washes and purifications, and on the same occasions as they did. So what do we mean by that? When you read the laws in Leviticus, when a man and a woman are intimate, and with the flow of seed, they are to wash. When a woman comes off of her extended cycle, she is to wash. When a person comes near the dead, chapter 19, they are to wash on the 3rd day and on the 7th day with a sprinkling in that particular case. So brothers and sisters, these are things we care to point out for edification purposes. Shalom, my brother Yirmiyahu Yisrael, and Shalom Dorayahu, and of course, Shalom, my lady Sarai. So these are things, again, we want to point out in this presentation. Or, as in this case, did they compare themselves to the Israelites of old? We pointed out that Gabriel Prosser did, brothers and sisters, in ancient times. You understand? So, these are things, again, brothers and sisters, we care, of course, to bring out for edification purposes. Thank you for that, brothers and sisters. Let's continue. Daddy Sharp, aka Sam Sharp. All right. Let me go back, if I may. And see this particular matter with the pictures coming up in this particular case. And I appreciate that, brothers and sisters, from what I'm seeing there say upon the screen. All right. So let's do that. Thank you for that, family. All right. We're going to present there. We're doing the share screen, if we will. All right. Thank you for that, family. We're going to go back here. Share it there in that case. If we will, pull this up. All right, start slideshow from the current slide, if we will, in that particular manner. Thank you for that. Daddy Sharp, aka Sam Sharp. All right, let's look. He was a person, as we're going to point out, was in the place that you call Jamaica of today. All right, let's continue. According to Mavis Campbell, there were Igbo or Igbo, pronunciation matter, people in Jamaica as slaves. Mavis Campbell is the one who wrote a book called The Maroons in Jamaica. You can get that book online as well. In 1803 in Georgia, many Igbo people who gained control of the ship were captured and refused to give in to the recaptures. Meaning, in other words, when they took over the ship and were recaptured, they fought them off. All right. In 1831, the same year Nat Turner was doing what he was doing in Virginia, 20,000 blacks who were Igbos in Jamaica struck for freedom, led under the man named Daddy Sharp, aka Sam Sharp. Now, that information that I got right there comes from a book called African People and European Holidays, a mental genocide by an author, may he rest in peace, named Ishaka Musa Bawashango. So I just want to point that out in that particular case. All right, what you just see there highlighted there in that manner. Let's go on, family, with the time allotted. Thank you for such. All right. Turner was a mystic who had found in reading the Bible what he regarded as a solution to the problem of Negro slavery. I got that statement about Nat Turner from a book called Negro in the United States by Edward Frazier. So, brothers and sisters, a brother is attempting to bring out this information and citing where one gets one's sources from. And you can look up these references in your own time as well. So what can we gather? That it is foolish in part, or we can gather in part, that it is foolish to sit there and attempt to separate the Black American and the West Indian. So let that be noted for edification purposes. A lot of the slave rebellions, or should I say some, if not a lot, of the slave rebellions in the United States, numbering over 200, some say numbering over 300, was sparked by what they was hearing, what was going on in the Caribbean. So let's continue in this manner. All right, from a source, let's go. Now let's look at this, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. What you see there in the map is what is referred to as, quote, Negro land. Now, why do we, brothers and sisters, with the time allotted, care to point this out? Because we do not intend in this to be longer than an hour. All right? So let's look at this, brothers and sisters, and see what we can gather and gain and glean in this particular matter. Okay? Let's look. Most of the blacks captured and brought to the Western Hemisphere came from the Igbo, Ewe, Bayafada, Bakondo, Bolof, Bambera, Serer, Ibibio, and Arada peoples. The Wolof live in modern-day Senegal. The Ewe and the Ibibio live in modern-day Nigeria. The Bambara, when you look at them, and no disrespect intended, look just like people coming out of Brooklyn who are quote-unquote black. So let us remember this map that shows what is referred to as, quote, Negro land, and the place under it called Guinea. Now, why do we want to point that out with Guinea, and why do we want to point that out with Negro land? Brothers and sisters, is very important in that particular case. Let's continue in this manner. Thank you for that. Remember this map because we're going to come back to it. Only about 6% of the slaves transported to the Americas came directly to British North America. About 40% were landed in Brazil, where Portuguese colonial slave masters used huge numbers of Angolan and Congolese slaves to cultivate sugarcane. Let's remember that as well, brothers and sisters. Let's go in this particular matter, if we will. Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68. History untold to the masses. And from Assyria to America, the tribes of Israel are in derision. Or, properly titled, the 12 tribes are in derision. Now, brothers and sisters, why do we want to show this and read, letting the book as an Israelite, speaking by book, I mean the scriptures, in this particular matter? Because we want to promote the products that a brother does right, giving honor and praise unto the Most High. The person who made the cover on the left-hand side is a brother that goes by the name, and his information will be in the description, named Chief Naftali Ben Dan. He comes out of the congregation DCB, for those who are interested. All right? So, the person who made what is on the right-hand side is a man and his wife that go by the name Bayis Mazan on Facebook, doing book covers, among other things. All right? So these are things we care to point out. But now, let us, brothers and sisters, go over something in the scriptures. If my brother Yirmiyahu is in the chat and is able, as I'm asking, if able to, only if you're able to, Aki, just type in where I'm going to be reading at in the scriptures. We're going to be in Ezekiel, if we will. Ezekiel chapter 27, verse 1 through 3. Why? Because we want to cover this from different angles and bases, where people won't just think, oh, Israelites only cite the Bible, so we did cite other sources. And where Israelites may say, wow, you don't even cite the scriptures to make a point. So let us cite the scriptures and quote external references to drive a point home for edification purposes, if we will. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 27, thank you for that, my brother. And we'll read here. The word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Now thou son of man, take up a lamentation for Tyrus, which is Tyre, and say unto Tyrus, O thou that art situated at the entry of the sea, which art a merchant for the people of many isles. Thus saith the Lord God, O Tyrus, thou hast said. In Ezekiel 27, I'm going to just cite the verses I'm going to read. All right. Will be verse 19, then verse 17, then verse 7 for reference purposes. So it's still, brothers and sisters, in Ezekiel chapter 27. But we're going to go to verse 19 first, then verse 17, then verse 7. It goes to say, Dan and Javan going to and fro occupied in thy fears, thy market. That's verse 19. Let us go on in verse 17. Judah and the land of Israel, they were thy merchants. They traded in thy market wheat and minnith, and penag and honey and oil and balm. Oil and balm, honey, bright iron, cassia, and calamus. Sounds like things that you were trading regarding eating and food. Now let's go to verse 7 and see about these traders. Fine linen, embroidered work from Egypt was that which thou spreadest forth to be thy sale. Bright and purple from the isles of Elisha was that which covered thee. What are we pointing out? Why do we want to read verse 7? Because in it, it distinctly says something about purple from the isles of Elisha. So, my brother, if you're able to, please type in where we're going to be reading. And this is in First Chronicles in the scriptures, First Chronicles chapter 1, verse 5. And let's remember what we read in Ezekiel chapter 27, as we go, as the saying goes, line upon line and precept upon precept. First Chronicles chapter 1, verse 5 says the following. The sons of Japhet, Gomer and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshech and Tiras. Now, we see Javan mentioned in First Chronicles, correct? We also see, no, that is First Chronicles 1:5. Sorry, Aki. If I said 5:1, I meant 1 verse 5. Sorry, my fault, if so. All right. We see that Javan is mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 27, along with Dan being one of the tribes of Israel. Javan, we see, though, come from Japhet. So let's see what it says, brothers and sisters, in verse 7. First Chronicles 1, verse 7. And the sons of Javan, Elisha and Tarshish, Kittim and Dodanim. The sons of Javan, Elisha. Now, what are we pointing out? Brothers and sisters, we just read about the Isles of Elisha in Ezekiel 27, where you had Japhetic, Hamitic, and Shemitic nations doing trade through the land of Tyrus, or the land of Tyre. But we want to point something out about that, if we will, brothers and sisters. All right? And I'm going to read from what will be considered by some maybe a, quote, secular book. And I want to show it on the camera for reference purposes. This is the book that we'll be reading out of, all right, called Ancient Carthage. All right, in this particular case, written by Billy Wellman. All right, and let's see what we see in this particular case on page 3. Chapter 1, the Phoenicians. In the waters off the coast of modern day Lebanon, Syria, and northern Israel live a variety of sea snails known in ancient times as murex. These snails produced mucus that was used in the labor-intensive population of a certain kind of purple dye that was prized throughout the ancient world and came to signify wealth at a high rank. Remember Ezekiel, where we just read about the people with Tyre, or Tyre, which is by Lebanon geographically. These people who lived in this area extracted the purple dye, were called Phoenicians by the ancient Greeks. How do you say Greece in Hebrew is Yawan? The Ionian people, I-O-N. Ionian people in antiquity is the Yawan, the Yod, the Waw, and the Nun. The Yawan and Ion people are the same people from Japhet who are the Greeks. And we just read in Chronicles, from Javan or Yawan, you get Elisha. And the Isles of Elisha were the Greek Isles that we just read of in Ezekiel chapter 27. So let's continue, brothers and sisters, in this particular case. It goes on to say, the people who lived in this area and extracted the purple dye were called Phoenicians by the ancient Greeks, which signified the color purple or crimson. In the forests of these lands also grew cedar trees. The cedars of Lebanon are mentioned in the scriptures. These two products, the purple dye and the cedar timber, became highly sought after in the ancient world. The Phoenicians developed into fiercely independent and competitive city-states, much like the city-states of Greece. Chief among them were the cities of Arad, Byblos, Sidon, and Tyre. We do not know what they called themselves or if they truly thought of themselves as a distinct ethnic group or nation. Early scholarship on the Phoenicians was done in the 17th century, and it was generally believed that their civilization emerged 3000 BCE and that it lasted in some form or another until Alexander the Great conquered the Levant in the 3rd century BCE. So the Phoenician people were around, according to that, brothers and sisters, from the timing of 3000 BCE to the timing of Alexander. Ezekiel, when he made his prophecies and talked in Ezekiel 27, was in between that time. It was not before 3000 BCE, and it was not after the timing of Alexander. So what are we pointing out? Just as we showed in Ezekiel 27 with Tyre, and that the Israelites in part, we want to show from external records, were part of the Phoenician people for reference purposes. Now, brothers and sisters, I'm going to take the liberty and the time, if I will, thanking you all for the time in being upon said matter. And I want to show this on the camera, if I may, right on this map right here, where you see what the pin is, Phoenicia. So when you read, brothers and sisters, about the matter of Tyre being upon by the sea, we can see exactly what that's talking about. And what we just showed came from the Oxford Bible Atlas. So we can show on maps where we're talking about. And now let's show what we're talking about in this particular case. I'm going to be reading out of a book called Hebrewisms of West Africa, if we will, brothers and sisters. All right? Hebrewisms of West Africa, and I want to show part in the cover, family, but this is the book we're going to be reading out of. All right? And it will be on pages hopefully everybody. Okay, sorry about that, family. What we're talking about, brothers and sisters, getting back into this, is what? Wanted to read, brothers and sisters, from the book called Hebrewisms of West Africa. And we're going to be reading in page 188 in this particular matter. What we're talking about, brothers and sisters, getting back into this, 188 in this book, we see the following, if we will. Thank you for that, brothers and sisters. Jews of Carthage in subtitle. From Sidney Mendelssohn, we learn there is an old tradition among the nomadic tribes of Tunisia. Now, mind you, Tunisia is where Carthage was. That the Jews settled in the country before the destruction of the first temple. Now, in the beginning of this presentation, we spoke upon the matter of the destruction of the first temple being during the time of the Babylonians doing such. And although this statement has been sometimes regarded as unfounded, there can be little doubt that a colony of Jews existed in Carthage soon after the building of the city. Building of the city of Carthage. So what are we pointing out? Getting into and expounding upon all of this is what? The Israelites were part of the Phoenician people who migrated as time went on to the place called Carthage for reference purposes and for edification purposes. So what are we pointing out? Getting into and expounding upon all of this is what? All right. Let us get back into the book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, and we want to go to page 189, and let's see what it says. And again, and scriptures indicate that certain tribes of Asher and of Zebulun lived in Carthage ever since the foundation of the city. So ever since, say, the foundation of the city of Carthage, Israelites, namely in part from the tribe of Asher and from the tribe of Zebulun, were living there. In my book that I wrote called Israelite History as it Relates to the World, which you can get online, I pointed out that Ahab, king of Israel, was married to the Zidonian leader, female leader, Jezebel. And they had a daughter named Atalia. Atalia eventually married into the southern kingdom of Judah. So if you have an Israelite leader, Ahab, king of Israel, that you see of in the scriptures, his wife Jezebel being a Zidonian of the people of Canaan, why will it be so hard to fathom that Israelites and Canaanites will be part in history of the people known as Phoenicians that went over later to the place called Carthage, and Carthage being in the land of Tunisia? We already pointed out, citing Dr. Ben and citing Mary Smallwood, about Israelites being in Libya. That was already pointed out in this presentation. So what do we want to get into? Going line upon line, precept upon precept, and asking brothers and sisters to remember certain points that we're going to go back and fall upon, if we will, right? Let us continue, brothers and sisters, in this matter. We're going to go back to this book here called what? Ancient Carthage. And I'd like to show it again, if I may. All right. This book right here is where we're going to be reading from. And on page from 82 to page 83, we see this in this book. Perhaps Carthage's greatest success was its trade. Like their Phoenician forefathers, the Carthaginians were particularly focused on establishing trade networks around the Mediterranean, and it says to accumulate wealth. They were renowned for their ability to sell anything to anyone at a price that made them a profit. The location of Carthage was most likely picked because of its excellent harbor and the fact that it lay on two incredibly important trade routes. One route being, it says, went from Spain to the Levant, and the other from North Africa to Sicily and Italy. The Levant area is where the land of Israel is. That's not in the book, it's just what I'm pointing out. Being in such a spot meant that Carthage was perhaps destined for prosperity. But the Carthaginians did not rest on that alone. From the city's founding, they embarked on trading expeditions all around the Mediterranean and went out into the Atlantic. They established trade routes along North Africa to Sardinia, Spain, Corsica, Malta, Cyprus, and Sicily. Due to the expedition down the West African coast by Hanno the navigator, Carthage may have traded with indigenous people in Western Africa and probably as far as Britain if the story of Hamilcar can be believed. So according to Hanno, brothers and sisters, in his book called The Periplus, you can get that online, brothers and sisters. What can we gather in that particular manner? Israelites, we are citing the scriptures under Ahab, married to the Zidonian, Zidon and Tyre were neighboring cities, women named Jezebel, and they had a daughter named Atalia, and Atalia married into the southern kingdom of Judah. So when we read Ezekiel chapter 27, line upon line and precept upon precept, we can begin to see, brothers and sisters, that Tyre, as we pointed out and shown in the biblical map, the Oxford Bible Atlas, what we're talking about for reference purposes. All right? What we're talking about for edification purposes. And brothers and sisters, and getting into this matter, if we will, just want to share this real quick with someone. Thank you for that. If we will. Reading and citing sources talking about Carthage had places where tribes of Israel's names is mentioned. No record found among Canaan, or no record found among Israel did the Canaanites or the Israelites say they were ever the same people. Let's point that out. Sidebar. Only people trying to dim the light on the nation of Israel is saying or are saying that the Israelites descended from the Canaanites. No, they did not. But even if you wanted to say that, you kind of, and I hate the terminology to have to say, you kind of shot yourself in the foot, because the Canaanites were shown as people of color, which is something that they try to say the Israelites was not, or they try to say the Israelites didn't exist. So, brothers and sisters, let's continue in this matter. If according to that, the people of Carthage, citing Hanno, went down to Western Africa, in part, what can we gather by citing, and this is why we ask you all to stay on the line if you can, and we appreciate it. But we wanted to show, brothers and sisters, this particular map again, if we will, right? And what map are we talking about in this particular case? All right. Negro land in Guinea, Western Africa. According to the Periplus of Hanno, the people of Carthage eventually went down to the Gambia, if we will. And we already shown biblically and we shown externally about Israelites going over to that place in Tunisia. I have a book here and I like to show for reference purposes, citing external sources, if we will. This book is called Black Cargoes. All right. And in this book, brothers and sisters, we're going to read part of it in page 8. And let's see what this says to collaborate what we're talking about. Finally, on the west coast from the Gambia to southern Angola and stretching across the continent to Kenya and Mozambique are the Negroids. The inhabitants of this vast area are often divided into two groups, the quote, true Negroes in the Northwest and the Bantu in the South and East. All right? And let's continue in this particular case and see what it says as we read along, my brothers and sisters. All right? It goes on to say, but this distinction appears to be more linguistic than truly racial. Why? Because according to even Bantu people of today, they're saying that they are truly Judah and that they stayed in Africa when other tribes of Israel were scattered here to the west. You even see that in some of the Bantu groups or Bantu Hebrews that you may see online of this day. Let's come on, brothers and sisters. Right? Both groups, although with more variation from tribe to tribe, among the Bantu have dark skins, woolly hair, thick lips, and broad noses. That's deep because that's what the papyrus under the Ptolemy said about the people of Judah in that case. All right? It goes on to say, and are usually described as being of average height, that is, the average height of the Europeans. Since the great centers of the Atlantic trade were on the west coast from Senegal to Angola, the vast majority of the slaves shipped to the New World were Negroids. The vast majority of the people shipped were Negroids, according to this book that we're reading from called Black Cargoes, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade. Why were they not called Hemito people who were the natives of Africa that this book too talks about? There's a reason for that, brothers and sisters. As we pointed out, Africans did not sell their own. They sold those who came from another land. So in theory and in truth, the Israelites dispersed from their land due to the Babylonians after the Assyrians assaulted, pushed out by the Greeks and Romans, went to places in northern Africa since the time of King Ahab, when the northern kingdom was still in existence. And then by the time you get to 70 AD to 135 AD, that is to say from the time of Titus of Rome until the time of Hadrian of Rome, the Israelites were even pushed further. Then, not to knock anything with, quote, Islam, in the Quran, it talks about, because there's a chapter in the Quran called Bnei Yisrael, called the children of Israel. Chapter 17 of the Quran is all about the children of Israel. And do you know what it says in there? That we sinned against those that went against the book and make war against them. So are the people in the Quran admitting that they were the ones who went against the Israelites? Who pushed the Israelites even further into Western Africa? When Muhammad rejected what the Israelites were saying, and the Israelites rejected what Muhammad was saying. Those to get into that particular history. These are things, brothers and sisters, we care to point out for reference purposes. Get your pens, your pads, your paper, and take notes. Because we want to sit there and show who were the people who were dispersed from a particular place. Because if African diaspora existed, then there will be nobody in the continent of Africa. Hebrew dispersion out of Africa still left Africa as it was, outside of the fact of it later being colonized by Belgium and other peoples. Let's go on, family. It would appear, moreover, that the smaller but still absolute majority consisted of the so-called true Negroes. This was especially true of the slaves brought to North America and the West Indies. So why, brothers and sisters, do we say what we say? Most of the blacks captured and brought to the Western Hemisphere come from the Igbo, Ewe, both in Nigeria, by father, Bakondo, Wolof, over in Senegal, Bambera, from what they call true Negro land. Brothers and sisters. What are we pointing out in that particular case? Ibibio Arada. People, did you know, according to slaverecords.com or slaveshiprecords.com, that most of the people that you find in the slave ships, their own names had the name Yah in it? Steven Spielberg knew that. Why you think they had the woman singing and the woman Amistad to who? Not Jesus, but to Yahweh. I want to point that out again. In the movie Amistad, the women are shown, and this is a Hollywood movie, mind you, where the women are singing, for those who saw it, Yahweh, Yahweh. Why would a Jewish director or producer have people clapping with head wraps on singing the Yahweh? Unless they know exactly what it is. Why in the movie Amistad, if you want to cite that, when the guy who was the lawyer was saying, okay, here's Africa, this is where you're from. And a person playing Joseph Sinkay walked past that map, drawn in the sand, and said, no, I come from even farther. Did you notice that in the movie Amistad? That when they showed and drawn Africa, the person that was taking on the ship said his people come from even further than that map that you drew in there. The people that were taken were the B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel. This is why black men, women, and child in the West Indies and North America, they didn't come in the ship to pick you up yet. Because they know they didn't sell their own people. This is not to spread hatred. This is not to spread tribalism. This is just to let us know what tribes we belong to. To let that history be known. The black man and woman and child in the Western Hemisphere is landless. Like Malcolm X said, you need land to have freedom. We're landless in the true land of Israel in the East. What they call the state of Israel is not nearly as big as the land of Israel itself. That land then became a desert when the true inhabitants left. So here we are, dusty in this place here in North America, which includes the Caribbean, when you get right down to it. Jamaica is part of North America. It's not part of the United States, but it is part of the North American continent. Located in the Western Hemisphere. And then you got the land of Israel that doesn't have the true inhabitants. Our laws come from the Most High in the Torah. Why you think the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment to the Constitution don't work for the black man, woman, and child? The white man can't give you laws that the Most High done already gave you. We're not cut from the same cloth. Brother Yirmiyahu, if you're in here, my brother, we're going to read in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26, if we will, to let the book speak. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26. And it reads on this wise. If I got the verse right, I definitely believe I do. Yes, Leviticus chapter 20, verse 26 says this. And you shall be holy unto me, for I, the Lord, I, Yah, am holy, and have severed you from other people, that you should be mine. So the Most High in Leviticus is telling us that he separated, severed, divided the nation of Israel from others. So our holy days in Israel do have holidays such as Purim, such as Hanukkah. That is man-made days, okay? But our sacred days don't coincide with these nations. They have what they call Xmas, Christmas, cold, New Year's, cold, Valentine's Day, cold, President's Day, cold, Lincoln's Day and Washington Day, cold. And if you know the history of Thanksgiving, there's two things to point out, which is also cold in many cases. That celebration of Thanksgiving goes back to the Roman goddess Ceres that they was worshiping. Also to the time when a woman contacted Abraham Lincoln after they slew the natives and said, you know what, we should celebrate what we're doing. And Abraham Lincoln made that an official day. The head of the turkey represents the head of the natives. Whether you say the natives are Israelites or not, we don't sit there and celebrate on Passover the death of the Egyptians. We celebrate the freedom of the Israelites. You don't celebrate the death of no one. When me and my lady was in Egypt, I didn't tell nobody, but I actually felt almost a shedding a tear looking at Merneptah. Now, Merneptah had his idols. We saw Merneptah's mummy when we was inside the museum in Egypt. And I'm there looking like, why are you showing this man like that? He's straight up a Hamite. He not Israel. He not from Shem, but he's a human. Why would you show him on the display? I wouldn't want you to show my parents on the display. I wouldn't want you to show my grandparents on the display.
Don't do that. And I mean no disrespect while we talk about Jamaica. I asked the brother who's from Jamaica, who left from, and is not to slander nobody, the understanding of Israel to the whole Kemet understanding. And we found the mummies. I said, let me ask you a question. How would you think the people in Jamaica would feel if they dug up Nani, the Maroon leader, who died, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 1733 or 1734, I think is when Nani died. If my data is off, let me know, family. But Nani, who was on the Jamaican currency, if they were to dig up her body and show it in the museum, how do you think the people in Jamaica will feel? In 1999, they didn't raise the gas price in Jamaica because they revolted and rioted. We're going to raise the gas prices. They have a song in Jamaica. If you get rid of the weed, we will burn down the cane field. Who sings that? Get rid of the weed, and I'm not condoning smoking. We're going to burn down your cane field. So if you get rid of what I deal with, we're going to burn down your economy. And that's what the Maroons in Jamaica were about. Some St. Catherine and Maroon Town. I was going to call myself a rapper one time and call the song Maccabees, Moors, and Maroons. This is not a cartoon, but the song never came to fruition. So what are we talking about the diaspora? When Sam Sharp called Daddy Sharp in Jamaica, leading the Igbo people in 1831 was the same era and time that Nat Turner was doing what he was doing. This is what we want to point out. I stand corrected. May Nanny rest in peace. She passed away in the 1760s, not the 1730s. I stand corrected. They were killing the British left and right. To where we got to sit there and make a treaty. The Israelites was killing the Romans left and right. Did you know the Romans said that the Israelites, which they called Jews, Iuda, in the Latin of Judah, was the strongest enemy that they had to sit there and fight against? The Roman army stated they didn't have any opponents like the Israelites. The toughest ones to have to deal with. All right? Just want to point that out.
Was that descendants too.
We want to point out, family, that many of us talk about the Maroons in Jamaica. But did you know, as pointed out in the book a brother wrote, and as pointed out that my lady wrote, if I may go and have the liberty to say that's partly where her family comes from, you have Maroon communities in Mississippi, Florida, and in South Carolina and Georgia. That is, correct me if I'm wrong, part where the Gullah people come from. And the Geechee people come from. When they talk about Gullah Gullah Allen, the cartoon, what do you think they're talking about on Nickelodeon? They know what they're talking about, and look at the people who are on the cartoon. So we do not, brothers and sisters, want to ever sit there and not understand the point of what we're talking about. Scripturally, externally, as an Israelite, I'm not, quote, afraid to go outside of the Bible to prove a point. And as a person who daughter calls me a historian, and I've taught history inside of a college, I have to get my master's in order to get back. That's a whole other story. I only have my bachelor's. But anyway, moving along. I'm not afraid to go into the scriptures either. So we want to point this out. Give respect where respect is due. My history teacher among the Israelites was a man named Chief Simeon. We used to talk about this kind of stuff. Cherish the people who are alive. I just heard of a person I had respect for about over 5 years who just passed away this week. Cherish them while they're among us. Don't take it for granted. Oh, they'll be here. Respect them when they're here, family. Brothers and sisters, getting into this particular matter, if we will, with the time allotted. All right? Didn't want to go over an hour, but we did so. So, in this particular matter, and in this particular case, brothers and sisters, let us show this map right there. And getting back into this book here, and we want to show the picture, say of such, all right? Black Cargoes, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade, all right? And on page 8 again of it, it says what? It would appear, moreover, that a smaller but still absolute majority consisted of the so-called true Negroes. Let's look at this map, seeing Negro land, line upon line, precept upon precept, citing sources. This was especially true of the slaves brought to North America and the West Indies. So Nat Turner's relatives doing what they was doing while Sam Sharp was doing what he's doing, one in Jamaica, one in Virginia. Let's move on. The Portuguese, whose markets were in Brazil, recruited more of their labor from the Bantu tribes of the Congo, Angola, and Mozambique, or south of the equator. Usually their priests would baptize a whole shipload of Angolans before the vessel set sail. And this is my statement when we became Christians. The English, like the French and the Dutch, obtained more of their slaves from the, quote, true Negro population of Upper Guinea. The English, French, and Dutch. Dutch Suriname, English, British North America. Jamaica was ran by the Spaniards until 1655. That's how you get Ocho Rios in Spanish town. Correct me if I'm wrong. Florida was a Spaniard colony until the British took it over in the 1800s. That's to say British, aka English, aka Americans. All right? So brothers and sisters, if they attained it from Upper Guinea, where can we see on the map Upper Guinea if it's not called Negro land? We all know the citation from Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Ham, black nations, not the Negro. That's been cited by Israelites for decades. I'm 43. I remember hearing that when I was 16. So a good 20-something years plus, and it's probably older than that. When you read Ham inside the Zondervan Pocket Dictionary, it would say the black races except the Negro or not the Negro. So these are things we want to point out. Did you know that Negro land extended beyond this map here and was shown to be part of Western Sudan as well? We already spoke about the diaspora of Israel and the Sudan. And did you know that Sudan and old terminologies extended to where Senegal is when you look at certain maps? See, we can't be afraid, Israel, of going into this kind of matter. And we don't want to sit there and sound arrogant either. But did you realize, and I don't mean to have to call his name out, that Sinetta and all these other groups didn't really get paid like that and became popular until they started debating with Israelites? He tried to get me to debate somebody. I wasn't accepting. And why did, personally, not to get too personal or sidetrack from the presentation, why did I never go on Sinetta TV? Like some people said they saw me. You did not see me on Sinetta TV. Because Psalm says, and it's not knocking any Israelite who has gone. Psalms chapter 1. Happy is the man that has not sat in the seat of the scornful. I got a daughter. You know what Polite was doing. You know what these people were doing. Some of these same things that some of the ancient nations was doing with children. I'm thankful that I'm not entangled in that, and I definitely am not into no pedophilia, nor am I into squandering and stealing and trying to con and get over. Happy is the man and whose heart is in the law of Yah. He sits not in the seat of the scornful, says Proverbs chapter 1. Psalms chapter 1. So I'm thankful that I never sat on Sinetta TV. I'd rather have less views on a platform than to be more known and known for something that people going to have to try to look into you because they figured guilty by association you knew and you ain't say nothing. No, I got a daughter. We ain't sitting down with people who know and okay with somebody doing something that's perverse as that. Leviticus 18, you know, the book that Polite shot up, and people's like, yeah, says you're not supposed to take a woman and her daughter. All right? So these are things, brothers and sisters, we want to point out for reference purposes. If I can be heard and people who are in good spirits, please type in the number 4. If I can be heard well and people who are in good spirits, we ask you, please type in the number 4. Thank you for that. Hoping everybody is well and will be better. Thank you all for subscribing to the channel, for commenting, liking, and from the way the analytics look, sharing. Let's continue on, family, in this particular case. Thank you for that, brothers and sisters. All right? So, getting back into this, if the English, French, and Dutch were taking from Upper Guinea the quote-unquote true Negroes, and we pointed out that Negroes don't come out of Ham, that's why books on slavery separate the Negro/black and what they call native. The authors of these books know what they're talking about. And when your third eye is open and did a little studying, told out to the Most High, for that being, in that case, you begin to see what it is. All right? This map here is called Negro Land. You can get this map online. They sell it on Amazon and in Google Images. That's what this is. Jay Frenan, hopefully that answered your question. Thank you for that. So let's continue, brothers and sisters, in this case. What are we looking at here? We just wanted to go over some history with Carthage, showing it in the scriptures with the Phoenicians. Who were the Phoenicians? Israelite leaders connected to the Phoenicians, and the scattering, and what external sources said about Asher and Zebulun, who were Israelite tribes. Let's continue. This right here is a map, brothers and sisters, showing from the book Hebrewisms of West Africa what the author is saying about the migration pattern of the people. We've shown this on several occasions, and it's shown in the book Hebrewisms of West Africa, as pointed out, and brothers and sisters, shown in the book that I wrote called From Assyria to America. So we want to show this with a matter here. Jerusalem. Elephantine. Remember Elephantine? We just talked about that last week with the Elephantine Papyrus. You can go to a book called Ancient Near Eastern Texts and Pictures by James Pritchard for that. Meroe, Khartoum, Kordofan, Kafur, Lake Chad, Kanem, Ashanti, Songhai. We went over that before. So what are we saying? Lake Chad? Why do we want to point that out, brothers and sisters, for reference purposes? Remember earlier, citing sources with the whole Lake Chad thing there? Let's go back up, if we will, family, right? And see where we saw Lake Chad before. Now, citing Dr. Ben, he wasn't the best friend of Israelites in many, many cases. But let's see what this person stated in this. These African Jews, as all other Romanized African of the era, were caught in a rebellion in Cyrene, which is in Libya, 115 CE, against Roman imperialism and colonialism. This rebellion also marked the beginning of mass Jewish migration southward into Sudan, West Africa, what we're pointing out, along the way to the city of Ayer and into the countries of Senegambia. Now let's see what this other part points out, brothers and sisters, in this case. Dr. Ben goes on to relate Israelite immigrants from the northern and eastern Africa merged with the indigenous groups in Western Africa to become the Fulani of the Futa Jalon, Borno, Kanem, and Lake Chad. So now if we didn't know before, and I say this in no disrespect, brothers and sisters, what are we pointing out in this particular matter, if we will, brothers and sisters? We're showing Lake Chad in this particular case, right? Most of the blacks captured and brought to the Western Hemisphere came from the Igbo, Ewe, Bafada, Bakodo, one of Barbera, Seer, Ibibio, and Arada peoples. Now, Lake Chad is shown right there, and we just shown who were the people being brought there in references. Let's continue, family, for edification purposes. The new name of the province, Syria Palestina, was normally, if not consistently, used after this date, meaning after Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans. It too celebrated the purging of the Jewish heritage from the land. Archaeological surveys confirm a considerable depopulation of Judea in this period. An unknown proportion of the refugees must have fled into the diaspora. So this is not an African diaspora. This is a diaspora of those of the house of Israel. This is why, in part, they don't come to pick you up, black man in Jamaica, black man in Brooklyn, black man in the Western Hemisphere. This is not at the same time to say, like Kohen Mikael properly pointed out and respectfully pointed out, and I agree with my teacher definitely upon this. Not all Israelites was taken to the West. Do you know, let's say the Beta Yisrael, so-called Falashas, the Israelites. You know the other tribes in Ethiopia that a Cushitic from the line of Ham was shooting their Glock 9s and their 38 guns at the airplane. I don't know if they had 45s, but to my knowledge, when they did Operation Solomon in 1991, the other Ethiopians or Ethiopians indigenous to the land were having their Glock 9s shooting at the airplanes. Don't say they don't hate the children of Israel. Babylon and Timbuktu, Rudolph Winslow pointed out, when the Israelites got into Western Africa, brothers and sisters, that they were, yes, hated. Let's continue with the time allotted. Thank you for that. We've gone over our time, but let's go on, brothers and sisters. From a source. Many Jews also are scattered over this region. Some natives boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger. Others are Asian strangers who fled there either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian. Hold on. Vespasian is the father of Titus. So why would he not get credit for what his son did? Okay, that's given in their way, their father honor. Or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans, Persians. Hold on. Let's go on what we just read. This citation comes from Cambridge, which is a prestigious university, where it says what? In part here, archaeological surveys confirm a considerable depopulation of Judea in this period, meaning in the period of the Romans. An unknown proportion of the refugees must have fled into the diaspora. So what's being pointed out here, according to the Cambridge book about the dispersion of the Israelites, it says an unknown proportion must have just went into the diaspora. Well, according, brothers and sisters, to the book Hebrew Wisdoms of West Africa, citing a book that's written in 1679. The book that I'm just reading from is Hebrew Wisdoms of West Africa, but it is citing a book written in 1679. And it goes to say, others are Asian strangers. Asiatic black man, were the Israelites inclusive of that? Who fled there, meaning there, into the area of the Niger, either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian, or from Judea, the same Judea we read of earlier, wasted and depopulated by the Romans. Brothers and sisters, do you see how this diaspora and migration happened? Who did it, when it was done, and what happened to the people it was done to? See, when you just say African diaspora, you are not showing the uniqueness of which people of Africa or in Africa that you're talking about. African diaspora doesn't show you Chadian, Nigerian, Ghanaian, Ivorian, Moroccan, Algerian, Ethiopian. See, the uniqueness of a country before or after colonialism, the uniqueness of a tribe, the uniqueness of one's linguist matters, of language matters, is overshadowed when somebody just says African diaspora. What I'm pointing out, brothers and sisters, is that the Israelites dispersed into Africa, and then from there was dispersed again. That's what we want to point out for reference purposes. Any questions or comments, please feel free to type it into the chat. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Nearly 4,000 inscriptions in the ancient tongue of Canaan have been unearthed in the city of Carthage, dating from the days of Nehemiah, of Simon the Just, of Hannibal. And we Hebrew writers, we who write and feel in our biblical tongue, have recognized at once that this so-called Phoenician language is more or less than Hebrew, a pure Hebrew dialect, nearly the same as spoken in the country of Israel. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Sorry about that in this particular case. It appears from scanty information available that the Bible was used to impress the Negroes, that they, as Israelites, could throw off the yoke of slavery and that God will come to their aid. What we just see here on the right-hand side is coming from the matter of Gabriel Prosser. He was telling the people that they, as the Israelites, being the Israelites, when you really study about the matter, with Gabriel Prosser, right? He was put to death during their timing in Virginia when James Madison was the governor of it, and Thomas Jefferson was the vice president, both coming out of Virginia. Thomas Jefferson, in the time of Gabriel Prosser, was the vice president, and the governor of Virginia at the time was James Madison. On this channel, I have a presentation series called what? Honoring of 12 Presidents and Ownership. Did Thomas Jefferson know that the people they were enslaving were the Israelites? Well, let's look. According to one preacher, and this is not to sound disrespectful, it says that God commanded American slavery through Moses. Israelites been citing Deuteronomy 28, which is about Moses speaking a prophecy for decades. What people did Moses speak of going into slavery that the Christian preacher slipped up and said that the slavery of the Negro was prophesied by Moses? You can go into a book written by Edward Blyden called Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race. Israelites, as we talk about Yom Kippur coming up and atoning for our sins, we say that we went into captivity, as we've been talking about, because we broke ties and faith with the Most High God. Again, the book called Christianity, Islam, and the Negro Race is where Edward Blyden, the book written in 1888, the same year that Brazil stopped slavery, stated that God commanded slavery in America through Moses. But the only people that Moses spoke about going into slavery were his own people, the Israelites. See, there was a reason why we were not expected to read. There was a reason why you were beaten if you taught one how to read. Be it a free or enslaved Negro, keep them out of books So when we do now have the ability to read comic books, not saying you should not have any good time. There's nothing wrong with having a good time. There's a reason maybe why, and I've pointed this out even before being an author, that Black books and books based on erotica, so-called romance, which is really smut and sexuality, promoting homosexuality, lesbianism, or otherwise, is in the same category on bookshelves. So they're promoting that kind of wickedness. Zane Sex Chronicles, Eric Jerome Dickey books, and all kinds of things like that. And has sitcoms for people to watch and cartoons. Now that the Black people know how to read, we got to sit there and give them Black entertainment television, BET, not Black educational television. Make history seem boring. Oh, I don't need to learn that stuff. You understand? So let's continue in this manner. Any free person who shall hereafter teach or attempt to teach any slave within the state to read or write, this is being in North Carolina in particular, or the use of figures accepted, or shall give or sell to such a slave or slave any books or pamphlets shall be liable to indictment. And upon conviction shall, at the discretion of the court, if a white man or woman, be fined not less than $100, nor more than $200, or in prison. And if a free person of color shall be fined in prison or whipped at the discretion of the court, not exceeding 39 lashes, nor less than 20 lashes. So if you was a Black person who was free and just happened to know how to read and teach another Black person how to read, they will flog you for teaching one how to read. DeSantis in Florida, let's get rid of Black studies. Let's get rid of that stuff. What are you trying to hide? Are you like the way I was, trying to hide the receipt for my mama so she won't see and read that I stole the change? Is that what you're doing? Don't ask for the receipt because I know I took the change. You understand? So what are you trying to hide by saying, don't teach this kind of history? What are you upset about? What are you worried about coming out? You understand? Let's go on, family. From a source, and we're about to close out. As the slaves came down to Fida from the inland country, they have put into a booth or prison near the beach. And when the Europeans are to receive them, they are brought onto a large plain where the ship surgeons examine every part of every one of them, to the smallest member, men and women being stark naked. Such as are allowed good and sound are set on the side, marked on the breast with a red hot iron, and printed the mark of the French, English, Dutch companies. Hold on. What did we just read in this source here? English, French, or Dutch? Brothers and sisters, when did we read about English, French, or Dutch earlier? In that book cited called Black Cargoes, where it says the English, like the French and the Dutch, obtained more of their slaves from the, quote, true Negro population of Upper Guinea. The English, the French, and the Dutch. Do some studies upon that. See what you come up with about who they was capturing. And printed the mark of the French, English, or Dutch companies. The branded slaves after this are returned to their former booths where they await shipment, sometimes 10 to 15 days. Our people went through a serious captivity. Then they were packed aboard the slave ships in spaces not much bigger than coffins, chained together in the dark, wet slime on the ship's bottom, choking in the stench of their own excrement. Stench means smell, stink, if you will. The height sometimes between two decks was only 18 inches. That's only 1.5 feet. So that the unfortunate human beings could not turn around or even on their sides, the elevation being less than a breadth of their shoulders. And here they are usually chained to the decks by the neck and legs. In such a place, the sense of misery and suffocation is so great that the Negroes, driven to frenzy, and I wanted to point out that Fida is the area of modern-day Ghana and Nigeria. When you read a book, brothers and sisters, written by a guy named Zen, is where this source comes from. Who were the people that were taken? This is not to divide black people along color lines. No, we're not doing that. We're talking about when the reporter back in the 90s, why did you sell your own people? Oh, we didn't sell our own people. We saw people came from another land. The reporter's like, and as we move along, you see, you didn't want to go that deep. You didn't want to go, quote, that far into that. So when you find people, brothers and sisters, saying that the Atlantic slave trade did not happen and we were already here, what are you saying to that kind of matter when you have records like Momuma Bawaka in Brazil and what Oluda Equiano wrote, brothers and sisters? What can be said in that particular case? The thing that I just got there comes from a book called A People's History of the United States. Brothers and sisters, and the author's name is Zinn, Z-I-N-N. So we want to show what we're talking about for reference purposes. Let's continue and close out, brothers and sisters, again with the time allotted. Get this book here while we talk about books. This is my lady's book, Chronicles of a Black Woman's Soul, In and Out of Time. Written by Tanya Westbrook. And you can, brothers and sisters, take my word for it. You can take this to the bank, as the saying goes. No complaints, only compliments concerning this book. The poetry book by my lady. The poetry book by my lady wrote. Some of the poems are funny, some are sad, none are fake. Care to get one? You can reach out to her at yeshsarai@yahoo.com. Also, so you can reach out to me as well, 908-587-4841. Now, mind you, I'm not going to sit here and lie. I'm dealing with a situation where that phone is not working properly, so it's using internet, Wi-Fi, so the WhatsApp does work. So as you can see going across there, 908-587-4841, only on WhatsApp until further notice. So I'm going to type that in here, 908-587-4841. That's real life right there. I had to decide not to get too personal. Am I going to sit there and pay for all these phones or have a meal? And they got real for a brother, so I decided to eat and let the phone be used on Wi-Fi. Not trying to gain sympathy or dry begging, just letting it be known what it is. You can get this book by reaching out to us in our email there or reaching out to me by WhatsApp only by that number, 908-587-4841. Thank you, brothers and sisters, with that matter. And next we have, brothers and sisters, get these books from now until September 24th for $20 each. From Assyria to America, if you think the presentation, and I thank the brothers and sisters, namely in part, definitely my lady, as well as Yirmiyahu and Ephraim, talking about it. I read it, brothers dropping jewels. And it's not to sound arrogant. If you think a brother was dropping jewels online, there's more jewels told out to the Most High in the books. And you can get all three of these books until September 24th for $60 on Amazon. All right, for reference purposes, if you will. Egypt talking writing. Ah, yes, sorry. Let me change that. All right. Let me remove that. Thank you for that. Yes, I put in that wrong one. 908, not 909, 587 4841. Again, this is only on WhatsApp until further notice or through the email that you saw already. All right. So want to point that out. Now, as an author, it's my duty and as a brother to encourage other people to become authors. Malcolm X didn't write his book, ladies and gentlemen. He spoke it and he sat there and Alex Shelley typed it. Jeremiah, the Israelite prophet, didn't write the book of Jeremiah. Did you know that? Jeremiah did not write Jeremiah. Baruch wrote Jeremiah. Did you know Isaiah did not write Isaiah? It tells you who wrote it. A man named Yodekiah. It's in Isaiah chapter 8. I took scribes and they wrote down what I said to them to write. And it's the same thing in Jeremiah about Baruch. And these are two prophets. So why do we think we can't verbally tell somebody and they type what we write? If the prophets did. No reason to not get your book out. You ain't got no reason, family. You ain't got no reason. You can sit there and talk, then you can get a book. They even got today audio books. You can just go and speak. Some people prefer audio books. I personally, this is Yeshaya. I pen name it Vincent Hutcherson as the author to give my father honor. Why will I never do an audio book? It's because I do these things on the channel for free. So I'm not reading my book, the entire book, as an audio book. I think there's enough free things going out there to where I don't have to make an audio book. That's just my decision. But these are also in ebook form. When you go on Amazon, you can see that in that particular case. Let's go. Asking you all to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share. And giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator, the Maker of heaven and earth. This presentation is now concluded, brothers and sisters. And we thank you all for the time. We started a little later and even still went over the time that we anticipated. And as my lady had pointed out, we're going to have, while closing out, impart a prayer service and give an honor and praise unto the Most High for knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. We ask everybody to face toward wherever you are, where the land of Israel is. I understand there are people throughout the length and breadth of this earth that watch this on YouTube. So we just can't say face the east because you might have to face the west in order to face where the land of Israel is. Furthermore, we just don't want to say face the east because facing the east to some meant to worship the sun in Ezekiel chapter 8. So we just don't want to say face the east. All right, let's go on and we're going to read in the book of Psalms. My mother's favorite psalm, if we may, and close out. That is Psalm or Tehillim 121. All right. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help comes from Yah, who made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. Yah is thy keeper. Yah is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Yah shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. Yah shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and forever. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
We want to acknowledge the new moon, the month of Etanim. We are several days away from another Shabbat. We're several days away from a matter of Yom Kippur, and we're even further days away from the timing of what is referred to as Chag Sukkot. Oh, pardon me. Chag Sukkot, the Feast of Booths. We want to, brothers and sisters, extend this out to the family that would be in New York or the vicinity of New York. Reach out to us by the email, Yesharai, YESHSARAI at yahoo.com. Or again, by the WhatsApp, I'm going to type this in. All right, you can reach out by that email or Yesharai at yahoo.com or by WhatsApp only in this case, 908-587-4841. We are intending, glory to the Most High, to keep the Feast of Booths, which is coming in 2 weeks from now, starting on the Shabbat. Not next Friday night, but the Friday night after. And we intend, brothers and sisters, to do the Feast of Booths in Prospect Park in Brooklyn, New York. So if you're interested, reach out to us by either of those emails or by the telephone number there, but again, only by WhatsApp. And I want to make sure I write that in, by WhatsApp. Okay. Again, that is 908-587-4841 in that particular case. All right. So if you're interested, the only thing is when we speak, we're going to ask, obviously, if you're going to participate with us when we're in Prospect Park, we'll let you know where we'll be and what is expected of you. It's definitely welcoming to have our brothers and sisters to worship with us in this particular case. We refer to ourselves as Danitepublications, as well as we are trying to start this here. All right. PAHT. PAHT. Poetry and history together. My lady's a poet, a brother writes history. We also want to point out that we have a website. The website is, brothers and sisters, Danitepublications.com for those who are interested in that particular matter. We want you, brothers and sisters, to also know that my lady Sarai is having a website and blog that we are working on about mind, body, and soul. It is excellent. I've seen the beginning projects of it. And if you have her book, you're going to love the website when it's up and running. All right. So these are some of the things that we're talking about and want to promote, encourage, and do, brothers and sisters, and giving honor and praise unto Yah, the creator, the maker of heaven and earth. Thank you for your time. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for sharing. Giving honor and praise unto Yah. Shalom. Please subscribe to the channel. We do not intend to go live because we will be going out and working on family matters and having decisions to be made and certain things. So we'll be back on Elohim and Creator willing, Elohim being a Creator willing, come next weekend. All right, with that, and stay tuned for October 1st, which is a so-called Sunday, a presentation called The Story of Solomon. Go to Ophir. Is it in East Africa? Let's see. Shalom Lakem.